Alright, this is where I'm going to make the base coat, and I'm going to go with big circles. Look at how I'm holding my pencil. I'm way back like this. And I'm just going to make circles with the side of the pencil lead. And I'll start over here and just start filling in. I know that about 1 layer's worth of lead is what I want for the lightest spot other than my highlight. And again, I'm not going just back and forth. I'm making big circles whenever I do this. I'm not just going straight back and forth. Big circles. Or really, if it helps in tight spaces, long ellipses will help. That way I get less stridation whenever I overlap. And if you feel the need to erase any of these guidelines, you can before you get into the shading. I sometimes do. A lot of the times, whenever I do actually get into smearing out the shading with a Q-tip or a blending stick, whenever I'm trying to blend, I wind up just blending these lines away. But if it helps you, you can get rid of those. Alright, so going at it. Base layer, just making it so that I'm not looking at something white. Again, unless it's the color of the paper, you're not going to have something white. Like even teeth on people, they're not white. Or eyes, like the whites of your eyes, they're not actually white. Not usually, anyway. That's because white reflects a lot of color. So you'll pick up things from the surrounding area. And you'll notice that I hesitate slightly in this area because it's a lighter color than the rest of it. So in this spot, because it's a little special, I'm really just barely touching the pencil to the paper. Really just barely touching it. Not even filling in all of that space. Now you could choose at this point to come back with your blending stick and go ahead and start doing some blending, or with your Q-tip, if that's what you're using, come back and do some of that blending. I'll show you how it is with both, but I'm going to wait to use my blending stick or Q-tip, and I'm gonna lay down a little bit more color or value, if you will. So I'm going to come back in here at the tops. And I'm going to go with smaller, still circles, but smaller circles, and lay down a little more lead. And going to do that up here, on the cap as well as the nub. And this is also where I'm going to come in and start creating a bit of that, where I was talking about that difference in the cap, how it has this little cutout to it. And then very fine line to help define it. I'll come back to the bottom portion. Back down here at the bottom. Same thing. And it's up to you what you make that look like. Maybe the top is a little bit darker, the bottom is a little darker, where you're making them as even as possible. Again, you're just trying to get across to us that the center is what's closest to our eye and reflecting the light back at our eye. So everywhere else is reflecting light away from our eyes and therefore creating a darker value or a shade. This part down here is all going to be darker because it's curved away from us, as that's the shoulder. And it's about, well, it comes over to about this grid line here. And then from there, I'll start going across the top and the bottom, just blending with my pencil. I may lay down what looks like a stripe across the top like this. Real thin arcs. Maybe rotate my pencil slightly, get a new edge to the pencil lead. Something like that, just bringing in some darker value across the top. Get rid of that word right there. And then here too. Ever so slightly. And down here. And now I'll come back. I'm use my Q-tip this time to show you, but I'll come back with my Q-tip and I've just taken the part of it that's kind of frayed out like this. I've just pulled off the excess and I just tightened that up a little bit. I like this side better though. And then go in and just kind of in the same way, just little circles. Making those strokes, those pencil strokes, kind of go away. They fade out, and you get just this base layer that's down. So you can see how those pencil strokes just start to disappear. And you got to be careful because you are picking up the lead with your blending stick, or in this case, this Q-tip or cotton swab. So you can move that lead, and you want to be real careful with that. And in fact, you can even use it to your advantage. I'm not pressing very hard, I'm just kind of moving my blending stick across. Then I'll come back in and maybe do a third layer on all of this, really picking up now the detail. And so I'm going to tip my pencil up slightly to get more of the tip and less of the side of the pencil, and really come in and get that detail of the darkness at the top or at the bottom. maybe I rotate my page and I come in and try to bring that down a little bit here. Not really drawing a line, but just making it darker there. Same thing here. Perhaps what I notice is that the cap itself, maybe it casts a bit of a shadow, or it makes this portion of the cap slightly darker. We'll come down here. Same thing. You might make it a little more stylized if that's what looks good or drives the imagery. This just a bit darker, but not quite as dark as the very bottom. And bring that up slightly. Same on the top. And I'm going to make it kind of dark right along this line to show that that's there. Just a little, and then out here, just a little. Now, here's what's tricky. This cap, I want to make that cap look like it's cavernous on the bottom. I might connect it there slightly, and then up here, connect it. Just to show that this shoulder fades away into that emptiness. It's inside the cap. Try not to overdo it, but then you can bring that darkness in to this portion of the cap. And then let that fade out along the shoulder slightly. So you're just going in your darkest darks and darkening them up a little bit, but the shadows are really cast. And then where the highlights are, you'll come back with your eraser, fill those in. So right along the bottom edge of this is where it's the darkest. So I'm going to darken that in with just some really small arc movements. It almost looks like I'm just blending with straight lines. And purposely trying to draw a little bit of an arc there with my shaded marks. A little bit of an ellipse. Same thing across the top. Maybe I'll go a little bit wider here since I'm going to show you that really is kind of up to you. As long as you're representing that this is three-dimensional, this shading. So what's closest to your eye should be the lightest part. Now I'm going to use my blending stick. This is a little stiffer. So I'm just going to blend this darkness up a little bit. You could do the same thing with a Q-tip. I just prefer the blending sticks. If you have access to blending sticks, even better, but unless you've gone out specifically and purchased one in an art supply store, you probably don't. Some people like to use rolled up paper. I prefer Q-tip over that. Don't use your finger though. So then with these, I'm just going to blend it out this direction some, and I'm using again the side of the blending stick when I need to, and the tip when I try to get into some real tight spaces or I want to press a little harder. I'm not worrying about the lettering and blending some of that. If I don't blend too much of its lead away, it'll be okay. I can always come back and trace back over them. Zoom out just a little bit. I don't know how much of that you saw. Turn off the light. Maybe that'll help. Okay. Okay, so this is where I go back now with some type of eraser, whether it's on my pencil or it's a kneadable eraser, and I might lighten up some of the areas slightly. Let me turn my light back on. I might lighten up some of the areas slightly. So, for example, over here on this part, it's just pulling it up and putting it on the end of this eraser. And I can just fold that over and peel it away. Come back in with my blending stick. And then what's really cool is if I take my eraser on my pencil and I use it to just kind of clean up the line work a little. Make that pop some, maybe come back in true distinction where the end there is represented. Blend that spot slightly. Okay, then there's this fancy thing called an eraser shield. This thing is pretty awesome. This will help if you have one. It can help you make the long highlights that you need. I'm going to zoom out quite a bit here and show you how to use this. So I know that there's at least 2 long highlights. There's actually quite a few if you look at the image, but there's at least 2 long highlights, and they're roughly here. And so it shields the rest of my drawing from my eraser, hence it being called an eraser shield. And the long highlight's going to do the length of it, so something like that. And then another one that's somewhere down towards the bottom like this. And that might also be on the cap slightly, maybe in close to the same spot. To kind of have another one or 2 near that first highlight. And notice now I'm not using the eraser shield, and I'm not trying to erase all of the lead, but just kind of provide some definition in the highlight. And then where I've erased and I need to put lead back, I'll do so. something to that effect. And then, because it's the shoulder, it may be advantageous for you to put in little dots like this. To show that that's curved down into the neck. Maybe something like that. Not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with it. So we'll leave it there. I hope that helped. Good luck.